I had this sort of regime of living as frugally as possible to buy as many records as I could. This was about 1984, 85. You know, I was going to lots of gigs, going to lots of underground gigs at the time. There was a very healthy underground scene in the 80s, which isn't documented, but there were lots of bands that used to play free festivals, underground venues in London, a lot of squat venues. Squatting was a real big thing, but there was a lot of people into sort of, I guess you'd call it, underground, psychedelic, space rock type stuff at the time. Absorbing music, buying records, obsessed by it, and then I came across this fanzine called Freakbeat, which was an underground fanzine edited by a guy called Ivor Truman, who actually was heavily involved in a Pink Floyd magazine. I think it was Opal or The Amazing Pudding, one of those, I think Amazing Pudding. He was a bit of a Pink Floyd buff, real expert, and he produced this magazine that essentially wrote about 60s, 70s music, mainly 60s American garage punk, but also was covering some of the new bands that I was into, and I got writing for that. And before I knew it, I was corresponding with Greg Shaw at Bomb Records in the States and writing about a lot of the new neo-psychedelic garage bands that were appearing at the time. Dukes of Stratosphere, which was XTC in disguise, were probably the most well-known of that sort of group of bands, but there was a lot of American bands, and then you had the Paisley Underground, the Long Riders, things like Rain Parade, Dream Syndicate. I was into all this stuff. Bucketful of Brains used to cover all this thing, and Freakbeat was part of this sort of spectrum of fanzines that were covering all of these bands, which were essentially against the grain of what was going on in the mainstream. Because at that time you had indie was really big. You also had, in the charts, was dominated by Stott Aitken and Waterman. Five Star. To me, 80s pop, you know, was the nadir for me. I mean, I hated 80s pop because it was just so corporate and bland. Then, from the fanzine became popular. We started a record label in about 1989 because we were putting flexi discs out in our fanzine and featuring underground bands. We'd collect a whole load of stuff that we had this vision of doing, like, you know, 30 issues into the future with flexi discs. But it soon became apparent that we wouldn't be able to do this. You know, it would take us years to do it, so we decided to do a compilation record, and that was really the start of the label that I ran, Delerium Records. And we put that out in about 1991, and it sold really well. I think I sold about 6,000 on export within the space of a few months. And everything on it was pretty unknown new bands. Osric Tentacles was on there, who went on to be pretty big, and there was the first track on there by Porcupine Tree, which is the band I ended up managing. And from there, started a label, and I was still working at that point. And also through the magazine, we started to get a lot of demand from readers saying, "This band sounds great. Where can I buy it? We can't find it." So we started importing records, stocking records and selling them, that they weren't being sold in the shops. I didn't go the usual route of reading all of the sort of books of how to start a record label and all that stuff. I just really relied on people that I knew.